Speedy Cerviche, he's the leader of the bunch.
That's right.
A heck of a fighter, makes a heck of a...
Back in the early 90s, animation studios were driven by a whole new wave, as the industry was booming with the creativity of groundbreaking ideas, which had left quite the impression on the kids of that era. Through the entire decade, cartoons like Hey Arnold, SpongeBob SquarePants, and Rugrats really made our afternoons. Also, who remembers Disney's One Saturday Morning block featuring Recess and House of Mouse, along with Cartoon Network classics like the Powerpuff Girls and Ed, Edd and Eddy. Sure, the 90s had gifted us with a strong roster of many unforgettable cartoons, but not every 90s cartoon enjoyed a long-lasting fame. Some faded just after a few seasons, some got overshadowed by competitors, and some simply slipped under the radar. Whether it's quirky animal characters, atypical teenage girls, or a curious boy in a big laboratory, I think these less remembered cartoons still deserve their due recognition. So let's take you on a nostalgic trip to the 90s and explore the top 25 underrated animation gems that you may have missed out on. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Tick, 1994 to 1996. I never truly understood why The Tick failed to get noticed, because this show literally had all the valid components it needed to become a success. It was hilarious, satirical, and absolutely stupid, but in a good way. Just think of Ed, Edd and Eddy's absurdism mixed with the antics of a comic superhero. Now, superheroes were all the rage in the 90s, especially the ones adapted from Marvel or DC, and in the overflowing wave of these better-known heroes, The Tick never got the attention it deserved. Even if this gem was a hilarious parody of action-packed tunes going on wild adventures. Adapted from the New England comic superhero, The Tick was centered around an invincible but clueless superhero who lived in his own fantasy world, yet somehow managed to save the day in his own weird way. The plot basically was about a blue-suited, goofy, superpowered guy who crashes a superhero convention and becomes the worthy protector of the city. He then runs into Arthur on his first mission. Now, this guy is actually an accountant in a moth costume and aspires to be a superhero. So of course, he partners up with The Tick and goes on to protect the city from notorious villains like El Cid, Chairface Chippendale, etc. A typical episode from the cartoon usually covers the Tick fighting the bad guys until Arthur comes up with a solution to save the day. And yes, like every other 90s cartoon, this too ended with a moral lining. But here, the Tick would go on to declare an absurd moral about the conflict before the episode's end. Initially, this cartoon still had a fan base, but as time passed, it lost its audience, despite its surreal and goofy nature. Although the Tick is known as one of the first successful superhero parodies, the creators never realized it would not reach its target audience. I mean, come on, it had the absurdist parody-style plot, something that only older audiences could fully grasp. Maybe it would work now. What do you guys think? Darkwing Duck, 1991 to 1992. Darkwing Duck was Disney's first real satire cartoon, fully built on parodies of classic spy and golden age heroes like the Green Hornet, the Shadow, and of course, Batman. While it officially ran for 3 seasons, many of its episodes sadly didn't make it to the air. The series mixed its quirky characters with a sharp sense of humor, action, moral lessons, and clever jokes that even broke the fourth wall. Plus, let's not forget its incredibly catchy School Jam theme song. It had the most kick-ass vibe to it, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise. Anyways, jokes aside, this cartoon follows Darkwing, along with his pilot sidekick, Launchpad McQuack. But by day, he's Drake Mallard, living in a regular house with his adopted daughter Gosselin, near the insanely dumb Muddlefoot family. The show explores Darkwing's struggle to balance his desire for fame with his responsibilities as a father, and a do-gooder in St. Canard. The episodes from this cartoon often highlighted the conflict between his clout-hungry ego and his better instincts, with his good side usually winning out in the end. In every Darkwing Duck episode, you'll find nods to superhero references, pulp adventures, and super spy stories, as Darkwing Duck himself is a satirical take on these classic heroes. His costume, gas gun, and dramatic entrances all pay homage to the pulp heroes we've loved so much. Even the fictional city of St. Canard is a playful parody of Gotham City. But this era was already brimming with slapstick-driven, overly sweet, and movie-inspired cartoons. As Darkwing stood out by appealing to a more mature comic sense, it somewhat became an underdog, and often aired towards the end of Disney's programming block on many stations in the 1990s, which really didn't help its visibility.
Super Tina
extraordinaire. Freakazoid, Freakazoid, runs around.
Freakazoid, 1995 to 1997. If you've never heard of this Steven Spielberg cartoon, I just want you to go and listen to the theme song right after this video, and no, I shall not apologize for how long it will stay stuck in your head. So, back in the 90s, Spielberg was going through a phase of producing incredible cartoons after his success as a director. He was behind hits like the Tiny Toon Adventures and Animaniacs, but somehow his third cartoon project, Freakazoid, didn't quite land in the same spotlight. This cartoon show featured a reluctant superhero who preferred making pop culture jokes over saving the day. Even though it had some of the same animators as Batman the Animated Series, Freakazoid had a completely different vibe. It was all about wacky humor, crazy dialogue, and over-the-top slapstick comedy. In my opinion, this one really got slept on, as its theme is easily one of Spielberg's best for cartoons, because it captures the essence of the show, its storyline, and the main protagonist with perfect balance. Although Freakazoid is the only main character, his family, friends, villains, and other guest appearances are honestly just great, especially because they've got that eccentric Spielberg style. But the main character often reminds me a bit of Deadpool, only with more cartoonish flair. He's essentially a zany superhero with super strength and speed, but what sets him apart is his off-the-wall behavior, as he's constantly bouncing around with boundless energy, never taking anything too seriously, and always ready to pull pranks to tickle your funny bone. Freakazoid's quirky and colorful personality contrasts beautifully with his alter ego, Dexter, who's geeky, introverted, and socially awkward. It's this dynamic that makes Freakazoid one of the silliest cartoons out there. Plus, this cartoon did not just break the fourth wall, it pretended like it never even existed. Although Freakazoid is designed like a typical superhero cartoon, it takes it to a whole new level with constant parodies, random tangents, and quick jump cuts. It's like organized chaos in cartoon form, and that's what makes it so enjoyable for me.
Report to the
Goof Troop, 1992 to 1993. In this cartoon, Goofy, a single dad, decides to move back to his hometown of Spoonerville with his 11-year-old son Max. Coincidentally, they become neighbors with Goofy's old high school buddy Pete, who's now a used car salesman, along with Pete's wife Peg, a real estate agent, and their kids, 11-year-old PJ and 4-year-old Pistol, with beautiful long red hair. Max and PJ quickly become inseparable, doing almost everything together. A lot of the humor in the show comes from the contrast between Max's relatively normal personality and his dad Goofy's innately goofy antics. Goof Troop ran for 78 episodes, and later set the stage for another underrated gem, a Goofy movie. Initially, Disney envisioned the series around the idea of Goofy being the head scoutmaster of a group of young scouts. While this concept had its charm, the creator recognized how it could limit the storytelling potential. After all, how many adventures centered solely on scouting could the show sustain? So instead of reinventing the wheel, the heart of the show lay in the dynamic between Goofy and his teenage son, dealing with everyday challenges like peer pressure, young love, school grades, and bullies. And with Goofy's goofiness, the show could have been a long-time success, but I guess there was not much to work around after the movie, and slowly Goof Troop got lost in the roster of similar tunes of that era.
Let's go bonkers. Yeah, totally nuts. Bonkers.
Bonkers, 1993 to 1994. The show revolves around Bonkers D. Bobcat, a former popular cartoon star who now works as a cop after his Hollywood career fizzled out. The system partners him up with Detective Lucky Piquel, a no-nonsense human who despises tunes. Together, they tackle crime in Los Angeles, but Bonkers' wild antics often derail their missions, much to Piquel's frustration. After solving numerous cases together, Piquel lands an FBI job in Washington, D.C. and happily bids farewell to Bonkers. In his place, Bonkers gets a new partner, the calm and beautiful Officer Miranda Wright. Kids loved Bonkers when it first aired, and it was a delightful mix of animated fun with detective adventures, and each episode was a whirlwind of humor, heart, and slapstick antics that kept viewers of all ages entertained. Even I remember enjoying how the lovable goofball Bonkers faced off against the crafty bad guys with his sidekick. It really motivated younger minds into pursuing their dreams and finding their true talents, just like Bonkers did. But there's a popular belief that Bonkers was initially meant to be a spin-off of Roger Rabbit, but legal complications prevented it from happening. Instead, Bonkers emerged as a reimagined concept that tried to capture a similar spirit. While the kids were charmed by Bonkers' over-the-top antics, the cartoon still had a broken base. There was a splitting fan base in that era who argued over which episodes were better, the ones featuring Lucky, or was it the ones with Miranda? While Lucky fans loved the contrasting personalities between him and Bonkers, Miranda fans favored the cartoon's focus on humor and her more laid-back personality. As for the show itself, there was always an ongoing debate as someone viewed Bonkers as an underrated classic that didn't receive the recognition it deserved, while others saw it as a poor replacement for Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. The Angry Beavers, 1997 to 2001. The 90s was a golden era for cartoons, with many great shows that often struggled to stay relevant in the limelight. One such gem was The Angry Beavers, which, despite being a hit, tends to get overlooked in favor of more well-known Nickelodeon cartoons like SpongeBob SquarePants. The Angry Beavers is solely about two brothers who can't stop arguing, even when they're dealing with the challenges of the wild, or facing the possibility of losing their home. When Norbert and Daggett, the two beavers, move from their home to a house on the water, their wild and carefree bachelor life leads to all sorts of hilarious mishaps and perpetual chaos. Despite the seemingly peaceful setting of living on the water in the wilderness, the beavers somehow find themselves in the middle of bizarre situations, from encountering eccentric government scientists and a swamp witch, to dealing with the dreaded Stinky Toe, and battling evil mind-controlling pond scum. Dag and Norb's adventures are anything but ordinary. Even if they're constantly fighting, they do love each other, so when it really matters, the beavers keep their differences aside to lend a helping hand. This was the dynamic that managed to capture the hearts of both kids and adults, but sadly, the Angry Beavers did not receive the fame it actually deserved. SWAT Cats, The Radical Squadron, 1993 to 1994. SWAT Cats may ring a bell for some of you, given that this cartoon is the most popular one amongst our list of underrated animated shows from the 90s. SWAT Cats, The Radical Squadron follows two vigilante pilots who create their own jet, the Turbo Cat, in order to defend Mega Cat City from monsters and villains. Despite being a Hanna-Barbera production, Ted Turner had to sweep it under the rug for its violent content according to cartoon standards. Apparently, during that time, violent crimes were on the rise, so the US government blamed cartoons and video games for setting a trend. So in response, Cartoon Network put this cartoon in god-awful time slots, which simply accelerated its path toward a quick cancellation. However, this didn't stop the show from developing a dedicated cult following. The Radical Squadron left a smashing impact on many kids, who went on to form a loyal fandom even after its controversial cancellation and rooted for a reboot. Although one of the creators once hinted at the possibility of bringing the series back, there still hasn't been any official word yet.
They're so bad, they've got more fur than any turtle ever.
Samurai Pizza Cats, 1990 to 1991. Samurai Pizza Cats from the early 90s feels like a wild trip down memory lane when you revisit it today, simply because of the quirky mix of the tacky 80s Japanese style with influences from shows like Dragon Ball and Animaniacs, which gives it a distinct and somewhat bizarre charm. However, despite its offbeat nature, the show has its own merits, and was a delightful cartoon. It's no surprise that Samurai Pizza Cats was brought in by Saban Entertainment, who were famous for introducing quirky Japanese content to English audiences in the 90s. Despite the lack of studio notes and accurate translations, they really stumbled upon a gem with this show. Whether you prefer its serious moments or its campy charm, Samurai Pizza Cats is a delightful treat that's definitely worth revisiting. The backdrop is a Japanese-style village known as Little Tokyo, where the Samurai Cats operate a fast food pizza restaurant. In this bustling town filled with anthropomorphic animals, a leading council manages all the village affairs because the emperor of the town has gone a little cuckoo in the head. But one of the more ambitious council members, named Seymour Big Cheese, wants to take over all of Little Tokyo, and his antics are often stopped by the Pizza Cats. The pizza joint is simply a front for their real mission, because whenever danger looms, these Pizza Cats spring into action with full force. Honestly, it's sad this cartoon didn't work out. The Samurai Pizza Cats was something very different back in the 90s, and possibly ahead of its time. Doug, 1991 to 1994. Doug was one of the longest-running animated TV shows of the 90s, running for 7 seasons from 1991 to 1999, and yet it's crazy that somehow nobody seems to remember it. This cartoon was one of Nickelodeon's earliest original animated series and played a key role in establishing the network as a top children's television channel throughout the 90s and 2000s. The show revolved around the life of a teenage boy named Doug Funny, tackling the typical challenges of adolescence, such as dealing with school bullies like Roger Klotz, or his crush Patty Mayonnaise. In the cartoon, Doug Funny and his family, including his parents, Theta and Phil, sister Judy, and loyal dog Porkchop, relocate from Bloatsburg to Bluffington, where his father lands a job promotion. In his journal, Doug chronicles all the adventures he experiences in his new hometown. Doug was not just entertaining, but also had a touch of education woven into its stories. The diverse characters often went on decorative adventures that ended with positive and enlightening messages for children to learn from. Besides the engaging characters and plot points, the show left a mark on popular culture, with its catchy theme song and fashion trends. In fact, Doug is often credited with popularizing colorful baggy clothes in the 90s. However, the show was in a lot of trouble in terms of syndication. After Disney acquired the rights to Doug from Nickelodeon after season 4, its distribution and promotion became even more irregular, which is what contributed to its current status as a somewhat obscure 90s cartoon. Two Stupid Dogs, 1993 to 1995. So, Two Stupid Dogs was a cartoon about two stray dogs who were always on the hunt for food. But regardless of their charming antics, they weren't the sharpest tools in the shed, often landing themselves in ridiculous and amusing predicaments due to their inherent dumbness. The show documented their everyday misadventures in a unique animation style, almost like the early Hanna-Barbera cartoons from the 60s and 70s, infused with the humor and sensibility of the early 90s. Interestingly, the big dog was more reserved and only ever spoke about food, while the little dog was chatty and drove much of the dialogue. Unlike some other shows, Two Stupid Dogs doesn't follow a strict series structure with a continuous storyline, as each episode stands on its own, with little to no impact from one episode to the next. Like most 90s cartoons such as Rocko's Modern Life or Animaniacs, Two Stupid Dogs also contains subtle sexual innuendos, which I'm sure that kids could never grasp. Nevertheless, this cartoon show was straightforward, yet incredibly funny, and even then it was overshadowed by the success of the Emmy-winning Rugrats and the Ren and Stimpy Show. Bobby's World, 1990 to 1998. Although Howie Mandel is famous for hosting several beloved game shows on television, back in the 90s, he was quite popular as the voice of Bobby in Bobby's World. The show centers on a 4-year-old boy named Bobby, who turns everyday life into exciting adventures through his vivid imaginations. Kids adored Bobby's World because they could see themselves in Bobby and his boundless imagination. Plus, this cartoon also allowed adults to understand how children perceive the world. Bobby's World cleverly combined live action of the cartoon's opening segments featuring Mandel with animated adventures centered around the imaginative Bobby. Mandel once shared that the distinctive high-pitched voice for Bobby was inspired by a real-life incident of him choking on a slice of cake, which is as funny as it is weird. Through the eyes of the lovable Bobby, the show spun many heartwarming tales filled with imaginative twists to everyday situations faced by Bobby, his friends, and family in each episode. Even if this was a very famous cartoon of its time, Bobby and his antics seem to have faded out of sight over the years. Mighty Max, 1993 to 1995. Out of all the short-lived cartoons that I loved, this one really stood out. Every episode of Mighty Max had a solid storyline and a fantastic theme, whether it was sci-fi, fantasy, action, adventure, or horror. And you know what? It worked perfectly. Mighty Max managed to strike a perfect balance. It was funny without resorting to cheesy jokes, packed with action that felt believable, taught lessons without being dull, and had a level of intensity without crossing into graphic territory. This might sound like it played it safe, but the cartoon was actually quite daring for its time. Even though Mighty Max somehow slipped through the cracks of time, it aired its 40 episodes from 1993 to 1995, stayed in syndication until 1998, and sadly faded into obscurity by 2000. This cartoon was about Max, your typical American wisecracking teenager who loves hanging out with his friends, engaging in extreme sports, and being a bit of a know-it-all. Although he's not big on studying, Max is surprisingly sharp when he needs to be. Then one day, he gets a red ball cap that changes everything. As it turns out, he's the latest in a line of mighty cap bearers, destined to save the world multiple times. His superhero team includes Virgil, a 10,000-year-old super smart owl from Lemuria, and Norman, a Viking warrior who also comes from the same ancient era. Virgil is the wise mentor type, a bit stuffy but always there with advice, while Norman is the strong silent type who lets his sword do most of the talking. Together, the three of them fight all sorts of threats, ranging from mad scientists to aliens, demons, ghosts, and all other kinds of monsters. But their main nemesis is Skullmaster, a horribly malevolent skull-faced demon trapped in hell with a never-ending army of golems, zombies, and lava men at his disposal. Skullmaster is 10,000 years old and aims for nothing less than total domination and destruction of the world. He's a lot like Skeletor, but on steroids. But sadly, the show got a bit stagnant at the end for its repetitive elements, and despite starting out strong, Mighty Max lost its charm.
Not anymore. From now on, my name is Toxie, and I'm a crusader against pollution.
Toxic Crusaders, 1991. Toxic Crusaders is a cartoon series from 1991 inspired by the cult 1984 movie The Toxic Avenger. The story revolves around Melvin, a janitor who's often bullied by a group of kids. One day, these bullies push him into a container of toxic waste, which should have been deadly. However, instead of dying, Melvin transforms into a green superhero known as the Toxic Avenger. The original movie has a dedicated following, even spawning sequels as a stage musical adaptation, but it's R-rated and quite gory, with the main character often resorting to violent acts against bad people. So, although the leap from this dark material to a children's cartoon was quite surprising, Toxic Crusaders was part of a wave of environmental cartoons that emerged in the early 90s, alongside shows like Captain Planet and the Planeteers and Widget, which were explicitly focused on environmental themes. Even other famous cartoons like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and New Kids on the Block would occasionally include environmental messages in their episodes, simply because it was all the rage back in the day. Toxic Crusaders stood out as both a sincere addition to this genre and a satire of it, cleverly highlighting the cliches that were becoming common. In a way, it was like the scream of the environmental cartoon boom, poking fun at the atypical tropes while also contributing to them. Despite its different approach, the series only managed to produce 13 episodes, with only 5 of those actually making it to air before the show was cancelled. Cat Dog, 1998 to 2005. If Nickelodeon's Cat Dog slipped your mind, chances are its catchy yet repetitive theme song probably hasn't. The show aired for 4 seasons from 1998 to 2005, bringing a fresh twist to the age-old rivalry between cats and dogs through its eccentric main characters. Cat Dog revolved around the adventures of its titular characters, the clever and strategic cat, who was named Cat, and the carefree, fun-loving dog, who was of course named Dog, living in their iconic half-dog-bone, half-fish-shaped house. The duo were actually conjoined with a cat head on one end and a dog head on the other, sharing a single body without any tail or hind legs. Cat Dog often dealt with the Greaser Dogs, a gang of tough guys, and their mischievous neighbor Winslow, who was a blue mouse. It was actually the dynamic between cat and dog that formed the core of the show, because even if they're best friends and brothers, their personalities couldn't be more different. Cat is refined and sophisticated, while Dog is carefree, always up for chasing garbage trucks, cars, and exploring, much to Cat's dismay. But the episodes of the cartoon had become too repetitive by the end, and after a long syndication, its following faded into obscurity. King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, 1992 to 1993. So, this cartoon brought a very modern twist on the legend of King Arthur. Apparently, the iconic knights were trapped in a mystical cave by the evil Queen Morgana, and are unable to free themselves. So the wizard Merlin searches through time and finds a new leader in King Arthur, the quarterback of the New York Knights football team. Along with Arthur's teammates, Merlin transports them to Camelot and appoints them as the new Knights of the Round Table. Their mission is to find the 12 Keys of Truth, one for each knight, which will free the original knights and restore balance to Camelot, allowing them to finally go back home. In the cartoon, these quarterback-turned-knights are each armed with special armor that can summon their own special creature to aid them in battle. Together, these knights pledge to uphold fairness, protect the weak, and defeat evil. Now, the show had a story that kept moving forward, with both heroes and villains making strides toward their goals. Each episode built on what happened before, bringing back minor characters and showing how the knights grew and changed. But unfortunately, just as things were getting interesting, the series was cut short after its 2nd season, leaving fans without any proper resolution. So in this case, you can't really blame anyone for forgetting an incomplete cartoon. Skeleton Warriors, 1994 to 1995. Back in 1994, CBS aired a fascinating animated series called Skeleton Warriors, but it only lasted for its initial season of 13 episodes. The creators had big plans for it, hoping to launch a whole range of merchandise tied to the show, and it did just that, leading to action figures from Playmates Toys, a comic book series published by Marvel Comics, and even a video game for the Sega Saturn and PlayStation. Back in the 90s, everyone in the industry was trying to recreate the fame that He-Man and Skeletor left behind. Skeleton Warriors was aiming for the same thing, with its skeletal villain, and its strong roster of heroes. The cartoon unfolds on a planet called Luminaire, where a powerful artifact, known as the Light Star Crystal, is at the center of a conflict. When the crystal is divided, the villain Baron Dark transforms into a skeleton, and gains the ability to turn others with dark hearts into living skeletons, in order to form his evil army. This sets the stage for a classic battle between good and evil, with the villains being represented as skeletons to make their allegiances clear. In every typical Skeleton Warriors episode, we follow Prince Lightstar, along with his siblings and their uncle Ursak, as they strive to secure the missing half of their crystals in order to take over Luminaire. Prince Lightstar leads the Legion of Light, which includes Grimskull and Talon, who are each empowered by their crystal halves. Their mission is to stop Baron Dark from unleashing his tyranny on their beloved planet. I don't think this one should come as a surprise, but Skeleton Warriors did not work simply because of how strongly it referenced the Masters of the Universe, and honestly, by then, people were kinda over it. Fish Police, 1992. In 1992, CBS launched an animated series called Fish Police, inspired by the comics of the same name. Unfortunately, like many other cartoons on this list, the show failed to gain traction and was cancelled after airing just 3 of its 6 episodes. CBS had really high hopes that Fish Police could rival Fox's hugely popular The Simpsons, but it struggled to find an audience, and one possible reason for its lack of success was its mature themes, including mild profanity and sexual innuendos. which were unusual for an animated show of that era. Like many other Hanna-Barbera cartoons, the premise of Fish Police was pretty straightforward. It was about Inspector Gill, a detective with a film noir vibe, navigating the underwater city's criminal underworld, dominated by mafia-style criminals. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because Gill finds women to be more complex than solving crimes. Whether it's the seductive Angel Jones, or the persistent Pearl, who runs a diner and wants to tie the knot, Gill's personal life is quite the drama. I mean, if the target audience was right, Fish Police had all the elements in it to hit success, from the clever use of anthropomorphic characters, with each of them bringing one-of-a-kind stories, to the vibrant portrayal of what an underwater criminal world could look like. The concept of Fish Police was quite different from what we usually saw in the 90s. Sadly, this one suffered a classic case of gone too soon. Mighty Ducks the Animated Series, 1996. So, as weird as this may sound, Disney's The Mighty Ducks actually started as a film about an underdog Pee-wee hockey team. You know, a classic story of overcoming odds. Then, Disney being Disney, decided to take a creative leap by turning it into an animated series, but with a cosmic twist. Rather than sticking to the established formula, it turned the characters into actual ducks battling against evil dragons. Instead of your typical hockey team, we get hockey-playing alien ducks from Puck World. After landing on Earth, these alien ducks become the California hockey team, and often fought a villain named Dragonus. Despite the unconventional premise, it offered a fun and refreshing take on the existing IP, something that I thoroughly enjoyed. So if you're a fan of Wise's storytelling style, or just a good sports meets sci-fi adventure, this series is a must-watch.
Good is threatened by the power of Eternia.
The New Adventures of HeMan, 1990. People who are hardcore of the Masters of the Universe franchise often tend to overlook this adventure to the He-Man roster. The 1990 He-Man series, while blending in with the classic 80s cartoons and toys, was easy to forget due to its familiarity with the hit original series. This cartoon saw He-Man being summoned to the futuristic world of Primus, in order to save it from the menacing mutants of Denebria. And of course, Skeletor followed him to Primus and joined forces with the evil mutants, to further his agenda for universal conquest. So by teaming up with the Galactic Guardians of Primus, He-Man battles tirelessly to protect the planet and its precious power resources from the relentless attacks launched by Skeletor and the mutants. The New Adventures of He-Man featured many updated designs and production choices, which is probably why people don't remember the addition to the He-Man franchise. This cartoon also had a relatively short run on the air, and despite people enjoying the show, it marked one of the final appearances of He-Man in a new cartoon format for a considerable period of time. Monster Force, 1994. It's almost surprising that this overlooked 90s cartoon is still better than any of Universal's live-action attempt at a horror cinematic universe. Developed by the consistently on-point Marv Wolfman, Monster Force gave kids their beloved action cartoons of the 90s, but with a Universal horror flair. It was innovative and distinctive back then, and honestly, there's still nothing quite like it today. The premise of this cartoon is set in a far-off future, where a group of 6 college students and their professor team up to form the Monster Force, with a mission to protect the world from monsters like Dracula, the Mummy, and a bunch of other spooky bad guys called the Creatures of the Night. This horror classic-inspired cartoon will most definitely make you nostalgic, as it retained the perfect essence of the 90s while incorporating a period when the Universal horror monsters were huge. If you liked the Monster Squad from 1987, you'd definitely dig this action-packed show. Mutant League, 1994 to 1996. Not many people remember that the Sega Genesis game Mutant League Football and Mutant League Hockey inspired a cartoon series named Mutant League. It followed Bones Justus as he joined the Midway Monsters, a pro-mutant football team, only to uncover secrets about his father. Basically, during a football match, an earthquake dug up buried toxic waste, causing everyone, including young Bones Justus, to mutate, which then led to the formation of the Mutant League, a sports federation for superhuman beings. In the cartoon, Bones grows up playing for the Midway Monsters, while dealing with corrupt League Commissioner Zalgor Prigg's constant schemes. Meanwhile, Bones also searches for his father and strives to bring order to the League. The first season was chaotic, mixing many storylines without caring about consistency, but the second season got serious. It seems like nowadays, only adult fans of the games or those who caught a few episodes on TV can recall the wild, gory, and cheesy adventures of these pumped-up mutant athletes.
Scratching, frisbee catching, presidential pets.
That's us!
Change into the cave.
Road Rovers, 1996 to 1997. Road Rovers is a mini cartoon series that follows the adventures of a team of 5 crime-fighting superhero animals who've been mutated into anthropomorphic beings and have superpowers known as Sapiens. This courageous group includes an American Goldador, a British Rough Collie, a Doberman from Germany, a Siberian Husky from Siberia, and a sheepdog from Switzerland. These Road Rovers live with world leaders, including the President of the United States, the British Prime Minister, the Chancellor of Germany, the Swiss President, and the President of Russia. So, in Sirocco, New Mexico, Professor Shepard is coerced into giving General Parvo his experimental transdogmifier technology in exchange for his lost dog. However, instead of returning his dog, Parvo tricks him with a bomb that completely destroys Shepard's lab. A year later, as dogs start mutating into monsters, Shepard, who miraculously survived, takes action to stop Parvo, the mastermind behind the chaos. So he selects 5 dogs and uses his transdogmifier on them, transforming them into Sapiens. These dogs, who are also the pets of world leaders, become the Road Rovers, a team of crime fighters with extraordinary abilities. The show aimed to give a fresh spin on a classic concept by having the main characters feature G.I. Joe-style gadgets while serving as the pets of world leaders when they're not engaged in saving the world. However, Road Rovers struggled to gain any form of traction from the kids and was quickly cancelled.
My format, Guardian. To mend and defend. To defend my newfound
Reboot, 2022. Much like Pixar's 1995 movie Toy Story, one of the first cartoons entirely made with computer-generated imagery was the Canadian show Reboot. It had a meta-narrative set inside a computer system world called Mainframe, which was quite innovative at the time. Despite limited distribution and international exposure, Reboot still gained a dedicated fan base. This fully computer-animated half-hour TV series chronicled the adventures of Bob, Enzo, Dot Matrix, Fong, and other inhabitants of Mainframe, the personal computer of an anonymous user. These guys defended themselves against constant assault from the viruses Megabyte and Hexadecimal. Initially, it was a lighthearted series, but it took a darker, grittier turn in its 3rd season, transforming the comic relief character Enzo into Matrix, the story's anti-hero protagonist, which catered this concept to older audiences. I understand why today, with CGI's significant evolution, modern kids wouldn't give a damn about a show like this. However, this was a completely new concept for the 90s kids, especially in terms of storytelling and world building. Even though it was criminally underrated, Reboot had left a lasting impact and still remains a favorite topic of discussion among many cartoon enthusiasts today. Extreme Dinosaurs, 1997. Extreme Dinosaurs is often known as the overlooked spin-off of the Street Sharks, where the characters first appeared as the Dino Avengers. Now, this is a spin-off cartoon that was already labeled as a ripoff from the Ninja Turtles, which is possibly why people believe there was not much substance to explore in this series. And while that's somewhat true, it still manages to be a little bit of a fun cartoon to watch. Basically, all you need to imagine is the same action-packed style as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in a thrilling Jurassic Park setting. The cartoon series followed a Tyrannosaurus, a Triceratops, a Stegosaurus, and a Pterodon, who were transformed into super warriors by an interdimensional criminal named Argor Zardock. So naturally, these dinos began rebelling against him and confronted his group of villainous raptors, who wanted to overshadow the Earth under the perils of global warming and reshape the planet according to their desires, regardless of the harm it brings to humans. Roaring with the battle cry, screaming, "Let's fossilize him!" Extreme Dinosaurs doesn't hold back, embracing its attempt to follow in the footsteps of its peers while carving out its own unique path. While it shares some similarities with other shows of its era, the inclusion of dinosaurs does add a layer of excitement with clever puns and captivating character designs. And let's face it, anything featuring cool dinosaurs is hard to resist, especially for fans of the Jurassic Park era. Maybe if the spin-off hadn't been such a direct ripoff, Extreme Dinosaurs might have just worked. The Pirates of Dark Water, 1991 to 1992. So The Pirates of Dark Water originally aired as a 5-episode cartoon miniseries titled Dark Water before expanding into a full-blown series. This short-lived fantasy cartoon is set in an otherworldly extraterrestrial oceanic world that is being annihilated by a malevolent substance known as Dark Water. This is where Rin and his eccentric crew come into play. Rin is the son of the dying king Primus of Octopon, and is on a mission to sail across the alien world of Myr aboard the Wraith in search of the 13 treasures of Rule. These treasures hold the key to saving Octopon and Myr from the encroaching threat of Dark Water, which is an evil black substance consuming the seas. Rin is accompanied by a loyal crew of allies, the Ecomancer Tula, the monkey bird Niddler, and the treasure-seeking pirate Eoz. But Ren's quest is threatened by a pirate named Bloth, who is the captain of the warship Maelstrom. Bloth will literally go to any lengths to obtain the treasures and control the dark water for his own gain. The Pirates of Darkwater really fleshed out its characters in its imaginative setting, but sadly, it abruptly ended after the crew had secured only 8 treasures. Even though it was a massive success, the cartoon was super expensive to produce, and well, the studio clearly ran out of budget. Gradually, the Pirates of Darkwater faded from the collective memory, although it did inspire a video game and a toy line. So that's it for our list of 25 underrated 90s cartoons that have faded from our memory. Do let me know if I missed out on any of your favorite animated shows which you think never received their due recognition. With that being said, which is your favorite cartoon from the 90s? Let us know in the comment box below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!